Hello and welcome to We Turned Out Okay. I am so excited to bring you my guest today. I want you to meet Julie Lythcott-Haims. She is, among much else, the New York Times bestselling author of a great book called How to Raise an Adult. She is the author of one of my all-time favorite books, Real American. She is the former dean of freshmen at Stanford University. And most of all, Julie is a woman who really goes to battle for people. She has the deep and wonderful capacity to make others, like me, feel seen and safe. Julie has a new book out called Your Turn: How to Be an Adult. And in talking about coming on my show, she wanted to make sure that you, the listener, were well aware of something. This episode is going to be all about you. So we get to spend today talking about your well-being, your heart's desire, your challenges, the superpowers that you have and that you can use in overcoming those challenges. I am so pleased to welcome to the show this author, speaker, and incredible mentor, Julie Lythcott-Haims. Welcome, Julie.
Karen, thank you so much for having me. And I feel, of all the ways you've just described me, what I feel pulled toward when I see your name or see your face or hear your voice is the definition friend. We have barely known one another, but we have known one another deeply by choice. And so I'm delighted to be with you across these many miles
Well,
and
thank
your
you.
listeners today. Thank you for having me.
It's so great to have you here. It's funny because I almost wrote friend.
Really
And
good.
I thought, oh, is that too, informal? Is it too
Presumptuous.
presumptuous?
No.
Exactly.
Well,
But
I took the leap. I took the
well, I'm
leap
really
and said
glad.
it first.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
In
Good.
in a short amount of time, but in a fairly deep and close way, which I love. I think that's amazing. Just to note, everybody, before we get started, there may be swears. Julie, we can totally swear. I'm wearing a shirt that says badass on it.
Okay, that doesn't really count as a swear, but
Okay.
yes.
Well,
Okay. Yes. PG 18.
PG-13, it can be, yeah, exactly. We can go a little higher than PG-13 today.
Okay, I'll try to use the equivalent of the swear words. There are swear words in my new book, as you know,
Yeah.
and that's because I think adulting often comes with swearing, but we will do
Yeah.
our best to not offend anybody
You know
on
what's
this
so
one.
interesting about that as I think about it? When my kids they are now 20 and 16. And when they were just a few years ago, when they were maybe, I don't know, 14, 13, 14, and whatever, 17, 18, I said to them, you guys, I swear sometimes accidentally, and I often feel bad because there's a power imbalance in our relationship if I swear in front of you. And so I don't want that to happen anymore. And both of the 16-year-old, the now 16-year-old, he jumped right out of the gate with as many bleeps as he could possibly do. He loved that idea. But what's happened is the discourse in our home is real and authentic because we eliminated that kind of imbalance of power.
Mm.
And yeah, so listen away from sensitive ears, everybody, and know that we're going to be talking like adults. And as Julie says, sometimes adults swear.
Amen. I love that.
Amen to that. So a little
Okay.
background as to how I got to know Julie. When during right around the last election, like this is a hard, quantifying this is difficult, isn't it? Julie's laughing.
Yes,
Do you
dear
want to tell
listener.
everybody how I
No,
know you?
no, because I think how you tell it and how I tell it would be different, as is true when any two humans recall a common experience. That's part of the joy of the human journey, is we all remember what was meaningful to us at the time, and then our memories are what they are over time. So I'm delighted I'm really excited to hear you describe this.
Cool. So right around the time of the Trump-Biden election, I'm on Julie's mailing list. You can be too. I highly advise it. It's awesome. And Julie sent out to not just to people on your email list, right, but to people on Instagram, to people in other places. You posted some Zoom links to office hours that you were holding. And I thought, I loved the idea of these. It felt like a safe place to go and just be together as we all waited for the results of this election. And it was really, I mean, if you think back to that time, it wasn't that long ago, but boy, it was a pretty high anxiety kind of time. And the idea of being in company with people who we were just gonna share this time. We were gonna acknowledge this moment, talk about our feelings, those sorts of things. And so I was like, well, I'll go for a little while. And I ended up staying. It was over 2 days. And I stayed for, I think it was probably 5.5 out of the 6 offered office hours.
Yep, you sure did. And I loved that. I remember when you first came, you're like, hey, I'm just here. We didn't know one another. Most of us were strangers to one another on the call, which was, I think, part of the miracle of it, frankly, that strangers said, I'm going to take a chance and go do this. And you were one of them. And you showed up toward the end or second half of the first day. And then there you were on the second day. You're like, I'm back. I think you even said, I moved something in my schedule so that I could be here. I mean, there was a real pull for you. You had felt something. And I want to know, what did you feel?
So I live in an area of the country that has been called the Deep South of the North.
Yeah.
And at that time, there were really terrifying signs, real in-your-face messages of racism and anger and hate and intolerance. And I felt surrounded by that. And just the idea that you would offer a space where people could go, to me, I knew somehow, I just, from the way that you worded it, I think I knew it was going to be a respite from all of that awfulness. And since then, I've in conversation with others, I've heard of what I was experiencing at that time as cognitive dissonance, a kind of cognitive dissonance, because I know that that these messages that were all around us are so wrong. I mean, and scary and awful. And I know that there are others. Like, for example, I first met you, or quote unquote met you, in the Parenting in Place Masterclass, which is a group of folks who have so many great teachings on educating children, helping children feel better coming through the pandemic. And the messages there were the ones that I was already very familiar with from my background as a child development expert, from my master's in early childhood education, like from being a teacher, from being a parent. And there was such great cognitive dissonance between what we were living through here in my neck of the woods and what you and everybody in the Parenting in Place Masterclass spoke about, that I just thought, this is going to be a good, safe place for me. And sure enough, it was. I mean, folks of yours who are like friends of yours who have written books, for example. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember her name, but one of the women who came and stayed on the second day was your friend from college who has written a book on the female Supreme Court
justices, Jessica Armstrong.
Yes, Jessica Armstrong. Actually, by the way, for everybody listening, this is, I think, maybe deepened our connection. I was so blown away by these office hours that I wrote an entire page on my website, which is located at WeTurnedOutOKAY.com/Julie. And I put a list of all the resources and quotes and things that I had found and learned about in those office hours. And then I sent, because I was like, I can't just put this thing out there. I need to check with you first. So I did. And you came back with a couple of things. You basically said, I remember this a little differently. Here's this. And it just felt so good to me that you would, you would not just acknowledge that, but like you had input on it, like you cared,
Some people might call that micromanagement, but I wasn't trying to micromanage. I was, first of all, just blown away that I had taken this impulse to offer a community to strangers online called office hours. That was a leap for me. It wasn't the first time I had done it. It's a pandemic era thing for me, but I had done that fairly, different off the cuff thing. I mean, who gives Zoom links to strangers without fear? Zoom bombing,
exactly.
So, and then you showed up at that, and then you had such a resonance with whatever happened, such that you created this beautiful blog post about it, showed it to me. And I really felt you were inviting me to say, like, yeah, what do you think? I'm about to put this up. And so at that point, I was just really invested in if there was anything I had remembered that you had perhaps not put in there. I wanted to say, oh, could you add this? Or I think this is what, I was at that point really trying to lift it up and help you make it as complete as it might be. I was really honored that you had decided to make a derivative work essentially out of the, it was this audio Zoom video office hours. And then you were like, let me write about this. Let me try to show people what this felt like. I just thought it was ultimately a really great collaboration.
Yeah, that's such a good word. Yeah, yeah. And so that's how we got started being friends.
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah. Well, can I tell the rest? I probably have to say this part. You can't say this part.
Absolutely.
Right. So then Karen emails me and was like, I really loved the virtual office hours. That was awesome. You know, you brought up some stuff that you're really struggling with. And I want you to know I'm a coach. I work with people. And if you ever want to talk about some of those issues, I can't remember quite what you said, but I was like, oh, shoot. What did I say? You know, how is it that she's reaching out across the 3,000 miles to me? Whatever I said was so clear to you in your psychology, therapy, you know, life coachy space. You were like, oh, Julie really needs to unburden herself. But I hadn't realized I was being that transparent. And what I loved about that at a meta level is I usually have that reaction when I talk to people. So I'll ask someone a question because I think they have basically told me I'm afraid or I'm in pain or I'm concerned. I feel like their expression has been that clear. And so I'll say, so let's talk more about this pain you're feeling or this fear or this, and they'll be like, how did you know? And I'm saying like, how did I not know? I'm just listening to, you know, and I think that showed me that you and I both dwell in this space of being intuitive, being empathetic, understanding, appreciating through language, body language, tone of voice, what is said and what is not said. Think, you know, you demonstrated to me by reaching out that you read people well. And so I decided, well, why not? Let me now go sign up for some coaching time or some therapy time. And we had a fantastic conversation there. You gave me some great ideas about how to manage. This is something I think every listener can relate to. It was right before the holidays. We were going to be dealing with kind of the family issues that arise when family get together. There's so much joy and beauty and connection, of course. And there are the family dynamics. We all have them. And you really gave me some key advice about how to be myself and hold on to myself no matter what was happening around me. And it was great advice. I definitely deployed it. And I'm so grateful to you for that. So that's how, so now I don't know if you're my therapist or we're friends or, you know, I'm the person who holds the office hours you came to, but in the aggregate, we did connect and here we are now. And that's the reason we are here now, right? You've decided, you know what? I think I can offer Julie to my community, to my listeners, right?
And I loved how you like, I sort of had this almost a blurry, like, oh, I really want to talk about all these things. Like let's get into all the books. And you were like, okay, wait a sec. You really showed up for our listeners in the sense of like, you were like, well, what are they going to get out of this? Like, this book is for adults. This is not a book about raising kids. You, Julie, have written a fantastic book already about raising kids called How to Raise an Adult. By the way, links to everything for listeners will be in the show notes here. So you can just look down in your podcatcher to get them. But when you said to me, I want this to be about them, like they need to know that this is a show for them. And I remember thinking they are going to love that because like we are, as parents, we are all exhausted in doing everything for our kids and thinking all the time about what's the outcome for my child, what's going to be best for them, what's going to be, you know, how can I make this all right for them? And so much of the answer lies in how we take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
But also taking care of ourselves for our own selves' sake is so important.
Mm-hmm. So what do you say we do that, folks? What do you say we do? It's not selfish. I mean, yes, there is a selfish extreme of it. A narcissist only cares about themselves. And we're not advocating for that at all, but we are advocating for a very, very healthy dose of, you know what? I matter. I got to look after myself. What I need matters. What makes me thrive matters. What brings me joy matters. What I'm afraid of matters. What I dream of being able to do in this one wild and precious life, quoting a poet, Mary Oliver, matters. And byproduct, if I am looking after myself well, then I am more able to show up with others, my children, my partner, my friends, my colleagues, my neighbors, strangers, in a way that is healthy, that is not oversensitive and wounded, that is not needy or angry. Like when we attend to the self, put your own oxygen mask on first, we are much more capable of being of service and use and loving and cooperative and patient with all of these other humans. So it really, really is a win-win.
I have a dear friend who made a poster for her wall when our kids were all much younger that says, "My alone time is for your safety."
I love that. I love that. And there is a little bit of a threat in that, there's a little bit, you see that kind of sign on, sometimes people who have very public facing jobs will have signs like that on their desk, or on their window. If it's a glass window, you come up, you need something from them and they're there to serve you. And it's like, your emergency is not my fault, or like, right. All of that. That's a little, it's funny, but it's also defensive and it's very declarative. And I get that, because we can feel that sort of frazzled, that like, stop. What was your friend's note again? Say it again.
It said, "My alone time is for your safety."
Yeah. I mean, that for your safety implies like, I know if I don't have my alone time, I might get out of hand and harm you, not in a literal way, but in a way that might be uncomfortable for the other person. And it's a bit of that double-edged sort of tongue in cheek, like I'm acknowledging it. It's a very clear signal, and I applaud it ultimately. I mean, I think, where we want to get is to that self-awareness of like, yep, this is what I need so that I don't do any harm.
Yeah.
I'm in this place now as a 53-year-old, and I have been here in this particular place I'm about to describe for maybe 14 years, which is, let me behave in ways that do not require apology. And let me be clear, I'm good at apologizing. I'm happy to apologize. What I'm trying to say is, for most of my life, up until my late 30s, maybe early 40s, I was overshooting and then apologizing. So I was often having to pull back, like, whoops, I said too much. I went too far, whatever it was. And I was really great at showing up with contrition, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like maybe even crying. Like I would feel like that was me. And I got to this place through my mindfulness practice of, wait a minute, if I get a little bit more in charge of what I do in the first place by having a well-honed mindfulness practice, maybe then I make the right choice out of the gate. Maybe I say what I intend out of the gate, so that I'm not overreaching and then having to apologize. So that's been one of my kind of an underlying little theme, a little sort of stream of water that's just constantly bathing my intentions, which is, what if we could get it right the first time? Again, I'm very able and willing and eager to show up with apology when that's warranted. And I'm just trying to behave in ways that are less harmful to start with.
Yeah, I hear you.
I bet you haven't even gotten to a single question on your piece of paper. Here we are, we're talking, and you're like, when are we going to get to the interview? Okay, good. I'm glad.
No, so my favorite kind of conversations are ones which do exactly what this does, which is they don't belong on paper. I mean, we are going to go wherever we go. I knew that this hour would go far too quickly.
Yeah.
Put it that way. So, but I did, just before we hit record, I did remember to ask you about the idea of sharing unplanned adventures. I think, so actually, as I think about it, the very first episode of We Turned Out Okay, which is episode 000, it's located at WeTurnedOutOKAY.com/000. It's episode 0. And though traditionally when I started, that was not a preview of the show. It was about the podcaster kind of episode. And what I did was, as a total freshman podcaster, I gathered my dearest friends, 4 people who we've known each other since we were 12. We are all going to be 50 this year, which is kind of fun. And we're still extremely close. Like I saw them last week, even like we're distancing and everything, but we're still getting together. And I invited them on the show so that we could all share about some unplanned adventure of ours. And I would encourage anybody listening to go back and listen to that episode. Ben is my producer. He's my husband. He's my producer. He has gone back and kind of reworked that so that, because at first some of them are hard to hear because two of them shared a microphone, or whatever, but it's
Okay.
eminently listenable. And we share 4 or 5 actually completely different unplanned adventures. And there are tears, but there's also joy. And so an unplanned adventure is when your life goes in a way that you really didn't see it coming, didn't intend, a total plot twist. Some of them are great and some of them are not so great. But ultimately I think what we make of it, is what. So if a very negative unplanned adventure happens, like the one I'm going to share about, some good things will probably come of that as well. And I can say that that's definitely true in my case. I should also say I first heard of this, I believe it was on like This American Life at least a decade ago, if not more. So this isn't an original idea of mine. This is something that, has kind of been in the zeitgeist for a while.
Yeah.
So Julie, you were gracious enough to say yes, that you would share an unplanned adventure.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you want me to go first? Or
Yes, go first.
All right.
Well, my feeling. Listeners, aren't you feeling a little trepidation right now? You're like, whoa, we're in that territory of unplanned adventures, plot twists. Oh my gosh, I'm not sure I want to share any of my plot twists out loud with anyone. So yes, Karen, go first, please. It'll make it easier for me.
All right. Well, so the one I'm going to share about it actually took place when I was 7 years old. It's not, I'm glad that sensitive ears are not listening to this conversation because it's not a sensitive ears topic. I was, and Julie, we've talked about this actually.
Yeah.
I was molested in my own home, sexually abused in my own home when I was 7 years old. I did not see that coming. My mother was right upstairs from me. And she didn't know about it until she didn't even know that this happened until I was in my 20s. I actually tell this story. If anybody wants to go deeper, I tell this story in Positive Discipline Ninja Tactics is how you say that. And you can get that book for free by going to WeTurnedOutOkay.com/PDNT. It will be in the notes, so you don't have to worry about, trying to figure that out. But I do talk about it a little bit more in that book, and I get into like because my personality completely changed. I went from being a very happy-go-lucky sort of typical child to being incredibly anxious, incredibly worried about everything. I one time thought that my mom had left me at the supermarket, and I crossed a stupidly busy road to try and walk home with my mother still in the grocery store, not understanding what the crud, I would worry about getting lost. I worried about being deserted, basically. And I tell that story in Positive Discipline Ninja Tactics because I want, if your child, I think I called that chapter something like what to do if something is wrong and you don't know what it is. So my parents had to deal with a situation. They didn't know it had happened. They didn't know what they were dealing with, but suddenly I had changed, and they did some pretty great stuff even without knowing what the deal was. So anyway, my unplanned adventure, I totally changed in this way. Like I suddenly was a very unhappy, freaked out little kid. And then as I became, this is a much longer story than I will get into here. I don't want it to derail our conversation, Julie, but
not at all. Share.
When I tried to tell my folks, all right, I'll tell a little bit. When I tried to tell my folks, I was about 12 and they didn't hear me. Like it was one of those, there was a show called Different Strokes with Gary Coleman. And they did a very special Different Strokes episode where the character Gary plays and his big brother in the show were about to be sexually compromised, and they were little kids, and that didn't happen, but they did the show because they wanted to be able to say to people, if this has ever happened to you, in fact, Gary Coleman comes on at the end and says, turn to somebody that you trust right now and tell them about it. And my folks were looking at my brother because they were worried that he was being molested by his baseball coach. And when I was over here going, hey, this happened to me, my mom really invalidated my experience. She didn't mean to do this, but this is what happened. She said, well, that can't have happened. Like, period, end of story. That can't have happened. And I was like, okay, but it did, but they didn't hear me. I think I didn't have the words. I always would suggest teaching children anatomy, teaching children,
Mhm.
how to say no, teaching children that there are some things that are not okay. Because that way your child will have words if something like this happens to them. So anyway, they didn't hear me. And when I was in college, I started, I was in a sexually active relationship, and I started having tremendous anxiety attacks. And I started having, like, I was fearful of walking around on campus. It was a real, really, really hard time. And I actually asked, this is something I rarely talk about like publicly, but it's cool. I'm willing
Mm.
to go on this unplanned adventure with you. I lived
Mhm.
about 2 hours away from home, and I remember that year I would call it I didn't have a car on campus, so I would call up my parents and I would be like, "Can I come home for the weekend?" And when I got home, I would ask to sleep in their bed, which I'm
Mm.
like a whatever, 19, 18-year-old person.
Mhm.
And my mom she was mentioning that to a friend of hers one time. She was like, "This is really weird. Karen's coming home. She wants to sleep in our bed." And this friend said to her, "You know what? Don't ask her any questions. Just get her to a therapist."
Mm.
And it turns out that my mom's friend, had been pretty much systemically molested by her stepfather as a child. So
Mm.
she knew the whole thing about the secrets and the whole thing.
Mhm.
And so my mother got me into therapy. She didn't ask any questions. It was the first place where I felt comfortable talking about my mother in a way that, like, it was the first time I felt comfortable exploring the idea of being betrayed. Like,
Mhm.
I felt bereft, like, she wasn't there for me,
Yeah.
kind of a thing. Um, and so that incident that happened when I was 7 years old just took me on
Mhm.
such a different trajectory. And the good thing is, I think the really good ending of this is I knew myself so much better after it. Like, I was 20 or 21 and sort of really comfortable with myself and understanding, like, I knew what an anxiety attack felt like. The therapist had helped me even understand what was happening was every time I had an anxiety attack, I was physiologically reliving the abuse. And
Mm.
that really, to understand that really meant a lot to me. Like,
Mm.
there's a reason for this, I think is how I felt. And then, I mean, it's even like, so in the pandemic, I started having anxiety attacks,
Mm.
and I was able to understand immediately what this was. And I see a great therapist now. And what he said was, okay, we need one anxiety attack is too many anxiety attacks. Like, let's talk about this. Let's really figure this
Mhm.
out. So the capacity, if this unplanned adventure happened to me and I'm trying to understand, like, what did I learn from it? One of the things that I learned from it, there's a lot, but one of the things I learned from it is to know myself well and to understand, like, that I'm not just this floating mind.
Mhm.
I'm in a physical body. It tells me things. It gives messages. It can be in pain. It can be receiving pleasure. Those things are important to know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Thanks for sharing that. And I don't know how many of your listeners are already aware of that story or the fullness of that story, but I just want on the part of all of us listening right now to just say, I'm so sorry that happened to you. It shouldn't have happened to you. You didn't deserve that. The initial trauma, the abuse, I mean, the sexual abuse, your mother's reaction, your family's reaction, you were harmed and then unseen in that harm as a child. And that's awful. And you didn't deserve that. And I'm really sad that that happened. And I'm really glad you share this story in the various mediums in which you do, because it's helping others. So I just wanted to say that.
well, thank you.
Um,
That means a lot.
yeah. When you say unplanned adventures, it sounds so jaunty. It sounds
I
like we're
know.
going hiking or we got lost, but then we found this really cool lake or something. And, when you first raised the term, I didn't connect it to trauma leading us to something we might consider an important learning or an important discovery or a way forward. Um, but thank you for demonstrating that, yep, we can have a very traumatic experience, and then the anxiety becomes the way we live with it. And then we get therapy, a really good therapist, and then we develop
Yeah.
this self-knowing and this resilience that comes from, I have been through stuff,
Mm.
um,
And I
and I can survive the next thing because I survived that. I'm stronger.
I definitely need to say too a couple things. One is not all unplanned adventures have to be this way. Like we can have,
Yeah.
I mean, standing. So I was fortunate enough to be able to, skiing is a real thing for me, like a real thing. It's a family
Okay.
thing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So cool. I've had the good fortune to go on the unplanned adventure of one time when I was in Italy, I got to ski the glaciers of Mont Blanc. I mean,
Mm.
who gets to do that?
Who
That
gets
was
to do
very
that?
unplanned and it was a really cool, it was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
The other thing
Good.
I want to make sure to say, just to put a kind of coda on this with my mom, is I would say that that also ultimately has brought me much closer with my mother.
Yeah.
When she did find out about it, I actually went to a thing called a Take Back the Night March in college. And I called my, that's where like any survivor of sexual abuse or rape or anything like that uh, can participate in these. And everybody gets a candle. You walk from place to place on campus. It's really cathartic and wonderful. And I didn't even know I was going to get up and speak until I did. And what I said was, if this has ever happened to you, it is not your fault. Know that it's not your
Mhm.
fault. And I got on the phone with my mom later that night. I said, this is the first time I felt that it really truly wasn't my fault what happened to
Mhm.
me. And I told her what I had said, which is basically like a description, a brief and, more graphic than I'm willing to get here, but a brief description of what had actually happened. So my mother says to me, that's wonderful, sweetheart. And she hangs up the phone. She says goodbye. She hangs up the phone. 30 seconds later, the phone rings. It's my father. But I can almost not tell that because my mother is screaming in the background. And my father says, what did you say to your mother? And like she was really processing that for the first time. And she was probably in her 40s, maybe 50s, something like that. So the next day she took off work and she drove 2 hours down to Connecticut to bring me pictures of myself as a 7-year-old. And she said to me, I want you to look at these pictures and ask yourself, how could this child possibly be responsible for this? There is no
Oh, beautiful.
way. It was so beautiful. Oh my gosh.
Beautiful.
And I felt so validated and I felt
Yeah.
so cared for.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had
I'm
spent,
glad.
yeah, I'd spent so much
I'm
time
glad.
having to care for myself in this way. And I just felt like, oh, she really does get it. So anyway.
Yeah. Good. Well, the stories I want to share are not coming from a place of trauma. Actually, I wrote down 2 notes here and I don't even know what the second one means. So let's just see where I go with this. The first one is a work story about an unplanned adventure. I was the dean of freshmen at Stanford. I had been in that role for 6 years. I, was a senior member of the administration. Things were going well. I thought, I was highly regarded and I was given opportunities and respected and all of that. All good. And one of my colleagues I ran the freshman dean's office. My colleague who ran undergraduate advising left for Oregon State University. And so she left in 2008, maybe the summer, and then the big recession hit. And so they had this vacancy of this office, which was quite large, about 30 people, maybe. My little office was about 6 people. And so she left, it created a vacancy. And so the big question was, who's going to replace Susie? And my boss and her boss took me to dinner at a lovely restaurant, which had been my husband's and my milestone restaurant since college, like the place we went to celebrate our first anniversary of dating, or when we got engaged, or, discovering we're having a baby or buying our first house. Like this was the restaurant it was a special restaurant to me. I'm not sure that they knew that. And they proceeded to give me a really difficult critique, almost a performance review.
Oh.
They were giving me feedback that some choices I was making were basically me being too big for my britches, I think was how it boiled down. I won't go into the details here, but it was like just stuff that came out of left. I wasn't expecting it. I was embarrassed. I mean, it was just like, what? They were unhappy with how I'd celebrated my birthday party on campus. I had like this evening event. Now I'm going into the details. Evening event at the faculty club where I was a member, and I bought meals, spent money there all the time. And I was having my 40th birthday party there. And I was told that was too much for somebody
Oh.
like me. And So that feedback came, and then I had gone on a recruiting trip to the continent of Africa for Stanford and visited 9 countries in 17 days, a whirlwind trip with representatives from about 20 other colleges. And I had collected artifacts and trinkets along the way to kind of bring back gifts to people. But I didn't have stuff for everybody. And so I had kept a blog along the way. And basically I asked questions from the blog afterwards. And when I returned home, and whomever got the questions right, like got this, necklace I had brought, or this, figure that I had brought. And I was told that that was inappropriate. And anyway, so I'm like trying not to cry. I'm eating at my favorite restaurant. These 2 people, my boss and her boss, are giving me this feedback that you don't really think of as the feedback that comes in a performance review, because it really wasn't about my work at all.
Yeah.
But there it was. And I just listened, blinking back tears. And I just, basically I had done enough work on myself at that point to be able to say, you know what, I'm not aware. I wasn't aware that these things were problems, but I appreciate you bringing it to my attention. And I'm going to work at it. I'm really going to try to understand what these things are about for me. And, I'm going to try to work on it. I feel like I'm about to sneeze, so stop. I mean, like I'm saying this for production purposes.
Bless you.
I've got my space heater on because it's cold in here.
Mm.
Okay, so I say that. I managed to say that. And within then moments, I think they saw whatever they needed to see from me by way of a willingness to listen first and articulate a willingness to grow and change. They then offered me a huge promotion, which was, we're going to combine these 2 offices, your little office with this big office. We're going to put you in charge of all of it. And it was the biggest promotion of my life. And I would then run that joint office for the following 3.5 years until I left at the end of the school year in 2012. And so that was certainly an unplanned adventure. Some of the most difficult feedback I had received professionally, and then it opening these doors.
And was that all at the same dinner?
I think it was, Karen. I was asking myself that as I retold it. I was like, was that all at the same dinner? I think it was.
I mean, I'm sure you'd remember being in your favorite restaurant.
Yeah. The second thing is, now I do know what my notes mean, unplanned adventure. You shared that you'd had anxiety attacks, and your therapist said 1 anxiety attack is too many.
Mm.
I'll share with you and your listeners that during the pandemic in January, before the insurrection at the Capitol, really throughout December and into January, I've been feeling this tweak and twinge in my left shoulder area, maybe the upper part of my left arm, my upper chest area on the left. And everything in my mind was saying, heart, that's your heart. Something's wrong with your heart.
Mm.
And of course it's your heart because you're overweight. And, and women don't often notice their pain and they ignore it. And often for women of color, for Black women in particular, when we go in, we're not even taken seriously around our medical issues. All of this is swirling around in my brain. And I'm just trying to make it go away. I'm just ignoring it. And these little twinges or tweaks, just like tiny little pains. And then one night, I think it was January 3rd, I'm in bed. I can't get comfortable. My arm, shoulder, upper chest hurts. And my brain says, you're having a heart attack. You're about to have a heart attack. You are about to have a heart attack. And so I'm starting to think, when am I going to tell my husband? When am I going to wake up my husband? I don't want to let him know that I'm having a heart attack, because I will be ashamed to be having a heart attack because I'm overweight. And that's like all of this is happening for me.
Yeah.
And finally, somehow I fall asleep. I wake up gasping for breath. My heart rate is 160. And I can't catch my breath. And I shake my husband awake and I say, I think I'm having a heart attack. Well, the long story short here is I wasn't having a heart attack. The paramedics came, they hooked me up, to the EKG. They're like, you're not having a heart attack. You haven't had a heart attack. There's no evidence of clogged arteries. We can see all of that from our machine, but it sounds like maybe you want to go talk to your doctor.
Yeah.
So I went, and that may sound simple, but my point here is, if you haven't gleaned it, I'm already judging myself about my weight. I'm assuming I'm having a heart attack because I think I'm so overweight that of course I'm having a heart attack. I had been really mistreated by a doctor when I was 20 in college.
Mhm.
I went in for a bronchial thing, like a cough that hadn't gone away for 5 weeks. And I got my vitals taken and all that. And the doctor, when he comes into the room, the first words out of his mouth were, "Do you realize how much weight you've gained since you got to Stanford?"
Oh.
And I swear I was so much lighter then than I am now. But I had put on about 25, 30 pounds, maybe even from freshman year to this was now junior year. And I had rode crew my freshman year. I was very strong and muscular, but I had put on weight that wasn't muscle. But the message that I took away was whatever the medical need or issue is, it'll be about your weight.
Mm.
He handed me a 1,200 calorie diet that I was to
Like,
follow. He didn't say anything about my cough. I was hacking up,
oh,
phlegm and this barking cough. And I said to him, "What about my cough?" And he's like, "Oh, we'll give you antibiotics for that." And just sort of waved his hand. Like, that's nothing. Your weight is the issue. And from age 20 to this winter at age 53, I really avoided going to the doctor for any reason and would go to urgent care if I had diverticulitis, which
something we've
I have
talked about that.
diverticulosis. It flares up
Yeah.
occasionally, becomes a very painful thing. If I had, a severe cough, I would go in, but I wasn't really all about the wellness stuff
Mm.
because I didn't want to be judged
Yeah.
on the basis of my weight. I learned that lesson. And so the unexpected adventure, the unplanned adventure of my fearing on January 3rd that I was having a heart attack such that my husband called the paramedics was I looked at my husband and daughter who had awakened during all of this, 19-year-old, and said to them that night at 4 a.m., "I'm going to my doctor." This was a panic attack, basically.
Mm.
I had had a panic about my own fears, about my health. And if that wasn't my spirit saying, "God damn it, get to the fucking doctor
Mm.
and just get yourself looked at," I don't know what was. So since then, have had everything looked at all this up and down, blood work, scans, and mostly I'm absolutely fine. And we're discovering I stop breathing regularly at night, AKA probably have sleep apnea. I did that sleep study
Ah.
and I found myself saying, my brain isn't getting enough oxygen regularly. And I'm still writing books and giving talks and having open office hours for people who connect. Like, wow, Julie, good job, girl.
Yep.
Look what you are capable of. And imagine how much more well you would feel and how much better your metabolism might be reacting to everything if you could just get a good night's sleep. And I never would have thought that going and facing the music, basically going into the doctor, like, "Fine, hook me up, test it all," would result in a deeper learning about myself that actually feels positive. It may sound silly for people who don't have health issues or don't have weight issues or don't have self-judgment issues, but who is that?
Yeah.
Who does it,
What
right?
is
So,
that?
so that's my personal unplanned adventure to complement the work unplanned adventure. And the last thing I want to say is, isn't life an unplanned adventure?
It
You know,
is.
there's
Yeah.
a Yiddish phrase, "Der Mensch tragt und Gott lacht." Man plans and God laughs. And I think knowing that failure is inevitable, scary things are almost inevitable. Trauma is not inevitable, but possible, maybe even probable in this life. And we can do all the planning and goal setting we want, and those are good things. But we must never let the perfectionism of, if I just plan it all, the control and the perfectionism is often how we try to be okay in the face of the scary things.
Mm.
And the more evolved way to be is to say, you know what? Man plans, God laughs. I can make my plans. I will try to be in charge of the things I can be in charge of, my own intentions, my own words, my own behaviors, my own response, try to regulate my emotions. And then I will be able to just deal with the way a sail deals with the wind. I'll just
Yeah.
be able to let the wind fill my sails, and it'll take me in some direction. And at some point the wind will change. And there's an ease to that when we can get there, that this is all a massive unplanned adventure. And if you think you're planning any of it at a grand scale, you are wrong. And let that go. And you'll be less disappointed, and you'll be more available to the awe and joy. And awe, I want to leave it on awe, AWE, like that's a big word, right? The awe that we can experience when we can then be in this place of shit happens. But wow, am I grateful for this amazing conversation, or wow, am I grateful for this beautiful sunny day, or this moment with my relative that I don't get to see often enough. Gratitude makes what we have enough. And I think gratitude is a way we can deal with these unplanned adventures. Well, this happened. What can I be grateful for?
Yeah. Yeah. So just like you did with me, I want to take a moment to acknowledge, I mean, it may not be life altering trauma, but to be told to carry that weight with you through all your 20s and all of you, all of your life until 23 years later or whatever, that's a lot.
Yeah. 33 years later.
33 years later.
53. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I have a huge hug to offer for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I thought of so many times as you were talking that not exactly the same things, but similar things have happened where an attribute of myself where I'm like, oh, this really stinks, will be called out on in some, not necessarily public way, but where I'm feeling like, oh, I can't look at that. I can't think about that. Like, and that makes it so much worse.
Yeah.
And I feel like what you actually just did, Julie, in the last 30 seconds or so, was you gave us a tiny microcosm of Your Turn, the book.
Nice.
And it was beautiful. And I'd love to spend, the rest of the
remainder of our,
I love it. I think that, first of all, let me just say that I think this conversation is the sort of thing that helps, I feel like helps listeners, helps me really get to know an author. And that's when I'm like, now I need this book.
Yeah.
Now I need this fucking book.
Yes. Oh, you just swore big time. Now I know what word I'm allowed to say.
Yep.
Okay, I've really been holding back.
Well, for today, we're going to have an E on here. So,
Okay, good.
In fact, there were so many times that I was reading it that I was like, I would raise my eyes to the sky and I would say, in such a good way, I would say, oh, this fucking book. Like, it's
I love that.
Good. So here, if you're watching,
that should be the blurb on the back. That should be the blurb on the back. Karen Lockhold. Oh, this fucking book. I love that.
It's so good.
I'm so glad. Thank you.
It's oh, you're so welcome. There's so much so I think one of the reasons that I loved Real Americans so much is because it's a memoir.
Yeah.
It's your story of, and I think earlier we were talking about, like, why are we friends? Why do we have this connection? One of the things that I felt reading your book or reading Real American, was that, like, we were raised in a very similar circumstances.
You got to tell people what it's a memoir about, just briefly, because they don't know.
So it's a memoir about, here's my words, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. My understanding of Real American is it's a memoir of growing up in the U.S. as a biracial woman.
Black and biracial, I would say, but yeah.
And in affluent circumstances.
In white places. Black and biracial in white places, dealing with microaggressions and racism. And the impact of all of that. Yeah.
Yes. And like it was almost at the same time. So like I'm in New England in the 80s experiencing things, but these are the experiences that I had were like meant for me in a way that they kind of weren't meant for you. And reading, I could not put that book down. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And in Your Turn, there's also so much of you in this book. And it is, I feel like it is part memoir. I don't know if you think that way.
For sure.
And it's your memoir, but then the cool thing is and I really wanted to bring this up. There's a bunch of, I mean, I've been thinking about them as biographies or autobiographies of others.
Yes. You nailed it, Karen. You nailed it. So this book is a genre mashup. And let me just say that publishers don't like that because they want to know, what is this book? Just like people want to know, what race are you? You know,
Yeah.
what gender are you? I
Yeah.
need to
We
know
we
so I
want a
can put you on
qualification.
a box, in a box.
Yeah.
Right. So I am not that person. My entire life has been lived outside the lines. My existence wasn't contemplated throughout much of American history to be the child of a Black person and a white person. I'm, bisexual. I identify as queer. I'm married to a cisgender white Jewish man. All of these things are possible and real and true. And so this book reflects the messiness of life and the beauty, I think. So it is part memoir, yes, meaning stories from my life told in the first person. That, I tell my own stories to illustrate what adulting feels like. I pull in the stories of other people, these biographies or profiles, interviews with close to 36 other people who represent so many different or who come from so many different walks of life, because I was determined, I'm not going to write a book on adulting that only talks about this certain class or type of person. I really want this book to be for all readers. And I want all readers to say, she thought about me while writing this book. And so it is deeply, richly diverse, these biographies, genderly diverse, sexual orientation, race, socioeconomic status, degree of education, religion or lack of, closeness to parents, estrangement from parents, people who have pets, people who are vegan, people who were adopted, people who have adopted, people who are struggling with mental health challenges, are survivors of difficult things, people who are neurodivergent, neurodiverse, neurotypical. I just hope that everybody will feel she was doing her best to be as inclusive as possible. So the memoir is one piece, the profiles are another piece. And then the third piece is it's very self-helpy. It's a self-help book filled with lists. The 15 things you got to do for this, the 12 things for this, the 9 things for this, right? The sweet 16, I call them, the 16 things you can do to build your good character. So it's practical lists, it's stories from my life, stories from other people's lives. And another reason for doing that genre mashup is we all learn differently.
Yeah.
Some people really want those lists. Some people
Yeah.
really want to dwell in the stories. So I'm trying to create this offering that is as accessible as possible to as many different types of listeners and readers and learners.
And beautifully so. And as you were talking, I'm thinking like, I'm such a story person. So, but what I would do is I would remember the story, right? I'd go back for that. And then I'd find a list and I'd be like, oh, here are some tips. Here are some things I can do. And I think this, like any book, I hate this term, but any piece of content, it has to be engaged with, like, it has to be, if you're going to get something out of this book, you've got to read the book. And I think that's why I love the stories so much, because they bring me right there. Like, and I can go, oh, I see this. I understand this. I actually, so there's a couple of stories that really resonated. One is, I'm trying to, our time is in some way limited. So
your leaders, let's make this so captivating. The listeners are not going to just hang up on us.
I loved the story. You talk about Hugo, a guy named Hugo, and you talk about that in the capacity of he is shining his flashlight. He's got and the idea of shining a flashlight is, you've got actually kind of what I was just saying. You've got this flashlight. You can't just wave it around. You have to turn it on. You have to, if you're going to figure out, in the chapter is called Get Out of Neutral. So if you're going to get unstuck, if you're going to figure out how to keep going, shine that flashlight, man, and really see something with it. And I bring up Hugo. I'd love to hear what you have to say about Hugo as well. But he ends up, so I'm going to just read this tiny little part. Julie writes, I'm putting Hugo's story here for you, dear reader. But Hugo has advice for parents too, which you can flag if you need someone in your life to see this. And here's Hugo's advice. Maybe it's worth it for parents to take a deep breath, slow down, sit down with your kid and finally offer something personal of your own to make your kid feel more valuable.
Mm,
And I would love to sit with that for a moment because
mm,
we don't necessarily think of sharing something of our own to make our
mhm,
children feel valuable, but
mm.
that's what truly works.
Yeah, Hugo, man, it's funny. So in writing a book that includes real people, you have to ask them, do you want to be in my book? Yes. Okay, great. Do you want to be in my book with your real name? And Hugo is somebody who did not want his real name used, or
Mm.
really the country he's from. So I changed his country. He's European, and I changed his name. So when you say Hugo, my mind goes to his actual name. So I'm like, okay.
So, all right.
But that's just part of the fun of writing, of other people entrusting me with their stories, which is
Yeah.
such an honor. Hugo reached out to me on LinkedIn, Karen. Hugo found me on LinkedIn and was like, I watched your TED talk on the harm of overparenting, and I feel like you're just narrating my entire life, and I don't know what to do. And my parents are making me study this and major in that and do these internships. And I'm just waiting for like what I want to do to come to me. And I was like, Hugo, do you think you know what you want to do? Like, what would you do if it was just up to you? And he responded right away across 8 time zones or 10 time zones, like, I want to be a physical therapist. And I was like, great, then go be a physical therapist, man. So this whole written exchange on LinkedIn. And then I put it in this book. And I'm like, as I'm drafting the book, I'm like, let me check in with Hugo, because who knows where Hugo is. I want to make sure he's comfortable being in my book. I need to find out if he wants his real name used. And I now am corresponding with Hugo by email. And he's like, Julie, everything has changed. And he had come to this realization that his parents were saying, do this, do that, kind of in the same field that his father was in. But his father had never said, hey, son, let me tell you about my work. Come to work with me. Let me ask for your thoughts on this, difficult problem I'm engaging with. And when his father showered that degree of attention on Hugo, Hugo felt so seen and so connected to his dad in a way that just was breathtaking for me. His whole voice changed on the page. He had been this like, person, and now he was like, yo, I finally, and he used harsh language in asking his dad for that. He said, I think my father didn't want to show me what he does or deals with because he was so unsure whether I would like it at all. So
Mm.
finally, one day when we were sitting at dinner, I just said, Jesus Christ, will you please teach me something about what you do? You've been in the business for 30 years and you haven't taught me anything. I barely know what you even do. I want you to teach me. And that turned out to be the pivotal moment for Hugo and his dad that led to this. Hugo was steadying his flashlight, and that flashlight analogy comes from Northwestern professor Joe Holtgreave, who's a major voice of authority in this book, in this chapter in particular. And Hugo was getting clear about what he needed. It wasn't so much about the work he was going to be doing. It was feeling this disconnection from family who were telling him, do this, do that, and then do this. But there was no warmth, not no warmth, but like he was
understand.
told what to do, but he wasn't being brought along to do it,
Yeah. Because
and
I said
so,
so rather
yeah,
than here's my
yeah,
reasoning.
yeah. And also he felt his dad wasn't interested in him, but was just telling him what to do with his life. But when his dad, and of course his dad was maybe feeling like, my son's not interested in me. My son doesn't care what I do. They both discovered a deep longing for a deeper connection. And he brought Hugo to work with him, and Hugo got to observe stuff, and Hugo got to share his opinions, and Hugo got to learn and grow. And dad seemed to feel proud to have his child there with him, learning and growing. And man, everything changed. So yeah. So then you see me being humble on the page. This is one of those places of the book where I get very meta, which is where I say, and dear reader, I was wrong in saying to Hugo, go be a physical therapist. I thought I was in a hurry. He LinkedIn me. I was trying to answer his question and concern about like, what should I do with my life? He seemed to know. So I just reflected that answer back to him. And what he really wanted, or what turned out to be the more important, deeper experience was he wanted a deeper connection with his parents.
Yeah.
And once he had that, then he was able to listen to the advice they were giving and sharing about what he might want to do with his amazing intellect and capability. Not that he shouldn't be a physical therapist. He may one day be that, but right now he's loving the work he's doing in the financial services field around data and tech, which is what his parents have been steering him toward, and he's good at, but he just felt disconnected from it because the human relationship around it wasn't there. And now it is.
And God, I mean, I think I was drawn to that really because of the parent-child relationship.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
how, like, so what are our relationships like with our parents? What are listeners' relationships like with their parents? And how will that show up in their lives? And I think the vision that I had while I was reading Hugo's story was of someone who is like stuck in a straitjacket and just fighting
Right.
their way out. And just I think it's so great that his father could listen to him. He even says, Jesus Christ, like you're not
I know,
teaching.
you can picture him. You can picture him at the dinner table, just
Yeah.
putting his hands on the table and saying that, like, Jesus Christ, Dad, come
Yeah.
on.
And it really makes me, I think kind of what I'd love to kind of go out on
Yeah.
is it really bringing it all together. Like we've talked a lot about unplanned adventures. We've talked a lot about validation, belonging, you going to battle, like even just as you were describing all of the different people in the book, my thought was she's going to battle for all these people.
Yes.
That's you show
Oh,
up.
I'm so glad.
You show up for all these people.
Yeah.
And
Yes, I
you do it,
do.
right? And
Yes,
and
I do.
and I think
I'm
about
sorry. I'm sorry. Let me just go there. Let me just have this
yeah, yeah,
moment.
yeah, yeah. No, go
Because
ahead.
listeners, you don't know this, but as Karen and I talk, the book isn't even out quite yet. It's coming out in a matter of weeks. And so I'm new at interviewing around this book. And so listening to Karen say, you really go to bat for the people in this book. It's the first time someone has said that to me. And I think you're absolutely right. And I'm so grateful that you see it that clearly. I'm actually rooting for all humans always in my work. As you know, I've tried for this book to demonstrate that in all kinds of ways. And yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. It's not just about these 30 plus people who are in the book. It's about every single reader who might pick up this book and feel drawn into it. This is a deep rooting for all of us to be okay and to be seen and held and heard and to
Yeah.
know we matter. And so thank you for saying that.
No, you're welcome. You're I'm rarely speechless, but I do feel a little speechless right now.
Well, Lord knows I'm rarely speechless.
I mean, I don't think that we think enough about going to battle for ourselves, and to have someone go to bat for you in this way. I mean, it can make us feel so cared for and so seen. And that is really, I mean, really that's where I wanted to kind of bring it back to, is like encouraging listeners to look for who's going to battle for you in your life. And if you're not feeling that, I don't want to say, how can you make it happen? I don't want to be like, well, find someone to go to bat for you, because that seems a little, I don't know.
Yeah, let me offer two things, if I may.
Yes,
One is,
please.
yes, we all need humans. Chapter 7 is called Start Talking to Strangers. Humans are key to your survival. And I'm deliberately subverting the childhood norm. Don't talk to strangers. And I do a lot of that in this book to signal whatever was true and right about childhood, adulthood is different. And you need to start talking to strangers, because everyone starts out as a stranger and we all desperately need humans. We are a social species. We live longer when we have good, mutually cooperative, beneficial relationships. Research has proven that time and time again. Not all humans have to know and love you or care about you, but some small number do, in order for you to really thrive in this life. So yes, you need to know who's going to go to bat for you, who you can call in the middle of the night. We discuss that in chapter 7. But what we discuss also in the book is how you have to be an advocate for yourself. Adulting is being in charge of your own being, looking after the self, fending for yourself in the most basic of ways, caring for the self, whatever that is, around your needs, your physical, emotional, mental challenges and wants. Like, you have to know that self. You have to look after that self. You have to carry that self forward in as healthy and well a manner, whatever that may mean for you, as possible. You have to be an advocate for who you are, what you know to be true about your desires around work and your desires around identity and being in relationship. It's on you. You will always be your own greatest advocate. You must be, and not in a selfish, narcissistic way, but in a way where you can say, look, regardless of what my parents think, regardless of what my siblings or extended family think, regardless of what my friends think or whomever, I know I am here to do this work, to give it a try, to try to get better at it, because I love it, because it is the unique combination of my talents and my passions or my loves. I am going to go be that person. And in the hinge of the book, out of 13 chapters, I say in chapter 6, get out of neutral. This is sort of the midway point of the work. It's technically not page count wise, but in terms of, being chapter 6 out of 13, I say, look, one of the things you got to get is an adult decides what to do. And even if they're people who ostensibly love them the most disagree with it, they do it anyway. And this ability to say, you know what, I know my parents love me. I know they've raised me well. They want this and that. That's them. I'm going to be grateful for what they gave me, and I'm going to carve my own path.
Yeah.
That separation, not I'm going to abandon my parents or we're going to be estranged. Although I do talk about what happens when that happens in this book. When parents will not accept you for who you are, and you plow forward and say, fine, that's the choice they're making. I'm still going to be me. That I am my own being, damn it. That comes through as a theme in this book constantly. Yes, you need humans in your life, and you must also be in charge of yourself. That's what it means to be an adult.
Wow. Well said.
Ooh, Lord.
Well,
folks, I hope you'll like this book. I hope you'll check it out and take it in. Karen, this has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you. It really, really has. There it is. Your turn. You know
the book.
You know what I really want to do? I don't know if we can do this. Julie, can we make it look like you're handing me the book from California and I'm picking it up over here?
Let's try.
All right, let's try.
Let's try that. Ready?
Yep. All right. And so now I've got it.
I love it. Good job.
All right, everybody, if you want to see the video of that, it will be available at okay.com/360. Julie Lythcott-Haims, what an incredible pleasure to have you on the show today. I'm so grateful to you. So grateful for all your work. So grateful to be your friend.
Thank you, Karen. I'm grateful to have you as a friend, a new friend, thanks to the pandemic. Who would have thought
Right? Who would
have any silver linings from these things? There's one thing I haven't mentioned, if I may.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to mention it here because you will resonate with this. My open office hours, created during the pandemic, revived around the election, have led me to develop a membership club where I'm going to have office hours regularly. I'm going to do AMA sessions where people can ask me whatever they feel like. I'm going to bring in experts occasionally. It's going to be a community where we feel the way you and I are feeling right now, and the way you and I and the other people on those open office hours over the last many months felt. I'm trying to really create that space more intentionally through a membership club. So folks, if that sounds appealing, you get to know my work and you decide, yes, I want to be part of that, just go to my website, julielythcott-haims.com. The link is not available yet, so I can't tell you what it is, but it will be obvious when you get there. Yep. All right.
Cool. Yep. Yeah. You can find this and everything Julie does. Sign up for her newsletter as well at julielythcott-haims.com. You don't have to go anywhere. You can look right down in your podcatcher to find that. I finally have some thanks. One is thank you so much for listening today. It means so much to me that you've got Julie and I in your earballs. That is wonderful. And finally, I have a special thanks to our producer, the man who not only is our sound guy, not only is he the guy that whose voice you hear at the top of the show, he is the 23-time winner of the Husband of the Year award, Benjamin Cole. Yay! He is someone that I don't know what I would do without, not just in an audio sense, but in a life sense. He's such a great partner.
I love that.
And yeah, that's about it from here. So thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.